Hi everyone, you can call me Psycho. Today I'd like to talk about one of my all-time favorite Pixar films, which you might be surprised to hear me say, as most wouldn't necessarily consider this to be one of Pixar's strongest entries. And that film is Cars. While this film's story can be seen as simple, uneventful, or predictable, I'd like to talk today about why I think that simplicity is actually this film's greatest strength. The movie starts off with a bright, fast-paced, loud racing sequence introducing us to our main protagonist for the story, Lightning McQueen. And Lightning is a young, hotshot rookie race car who quickly became a very serious contender for the coveted Piston Cup trophy. He's essentially the perfect race car. He has a very sleek aerodynamic design, he's very fast and agile on the racetrack, and he's great at making quick decisions during the race. But as Strip Weathers, the king, very eloquently put it,
"You got more talent in one lug nut than a lot of cars has got in their whole body.
Really? Oh,
But you're stupid."
Excuse me?
which is probably my favorite quote in the whole movie. It perfectly sums up Lightning's character at this point in the story. He can have all the talent in the world, but if he isn't willing to listen to and value the people around him who are trying to help him, that talent doesn't mean anything. He very well could have won the Piston Cup if he had listened to and valued his team's advice, but instead he ends up only tying the race by the skin of his teeth, or rather, his tongue, and then he has to go to California to participate in a tiebreaker race between himself, the King, and Chick Hicks. Both King and Chick seem to be reflections of who Lightning could become. The King has been a champion for years, and has enough experience, wisdom, and maturity to understand what's most important in his life and his career. Whereas Chick Hicks cares so much about fame, recognition, and success that, well, if you think Lightning's a jerk. And seeing the way Lightning acts at the beginning of the film, he definitely seems to be headed down the least desirable of the two paths. But when on his way to the California race, he pressures his driver, Mac, into driving all night to get him to the race as early as possible. This causes Mac to doze off and then not notice a sleeping Lightning McQueen falling out of his trailer and onto the freeway. I do also want to mention that in this book, there is a canon backstory for Lightning McQueen that shows that he and Mac are actually longtime close friends, and that it was actually Mac who got Lightning the Rusty's partnership to begin with, which makes it even more difficult to watch him mistreat Mac in this part of the film. And props to Mac for sticking with McQueen for so long, because either he's a very loyal friend, or Rusty's pays him a lot to deal with McQueen's bullshit. But anyway, then of course Lightning gets stuck in Radiator Springs, where he meets the residents of the small rundown town. First of whom is Mater, who immediately takes a liking to McQueen, even though Lightning initially wants nothing to do with him, most likely because Lightning's not a big fan of rusty cars. And Mater is really the only resident of the town who is welcoming to McQueen initially, which is pretty understandable considering that this guy just showed up in their town, destroyed their road, took no responsibility for it, and talked down to all the townspeople, or town's cars. But Mater doesn't really care. He's probably been treated like an idiot tow truck his whole life, and he's just used to it at this point. And his desire to be McQueen's friend persists until after the tractor tipping scene, where he admits to McQueen that he considers him to be his best friend. And after this, Lightning has a conversation with Sally, a beautiful blue Porsche who is the town attorney, the owner of the Cozy Cone Motel, and Mater's fiance.
What? Nah, just kidding. She just likes me for my body.
And she inquires if Lightning really meant what he said to Mater when he promised him a helicopter ride. As much of a silly thing as it seemed, it meant something to Mater, and this conversation helps Lightning realize that. That for the first time in a long time, he realizes he has someone who cares about him and counts on him. This scene not only does so much for the relationship between Lightning and Mater, but it also does wonders for Sally's character as a whole. Before this scene, she had initially hated Lightning and then eventually extended an invitation to stay in her motel for free as a thank you for fixing the road, and this obviously showed her kind of warming up to McQueen and seeing enough redeeming qualities in him to do him a favor. But this is the scene where it's made clear that she sees something in Lightning to the point where she sees it as worthwhile to have this conversation with him. She cares about Mater enough to not want to see him be mistreated by McQueen, but she also is willing to believe that Lightning will take her seriously if she's honest with him about that. This is a very pivotal scene in the movie, and what I just found out recently when watching the bonus features on Cars is that it came into the story very late. It was actually created by Bonnie Hunt when John Lasseter came to her asking for advice on how to improve Sally's character. This was also one of the few scenes that Owen Wilson and Bonnie Hunt recorded together in the studio, and I feel like you can really feel that in the way their lines are delivered and the way their conversation progresses. Later we have the iconic McQueen and Sally driving sequence with incredible environments, animation, and camera work, and of course topped off by Randy Newman's excellent score. This scene really solidifies Sally and McQueen's relationship, where she tells Lightning about her past, not so subtly mirroring the journey that McQueen is currently on, and she shares the history and the scenery of Radiator Springs with him. At this point, Lightning as a character is almost unrecognizable compared to who he was at the very beginning of the film. We start to wonder as an audience if he'd even really want to leave Radiator Springs after he finished fixing the road. Which he does, but not until after he's supported each and every citizen in Radiator Springs, even though it could possibly make him late for his race. But he's unfortunately interrupted by the paparazzi, Mac, and his agent Harv on the phone, interrupting him and getting him to go to the race. As it turns out, they were called by Doc Hudson, who from the very beginning, out of all the town's cars, had the most distaste for McQueen. And yeah, at the beginning, Lightning was a jerk, but Doc always seemed to take McQueen's appearance in Radiator Springs a lot harder than the others, because Doc used to be a racer himself. Doc was thrown out of the racing world before he was ready. It was his passion, it was his life, and when it was taken away from him, and he eventually found his new purpose in Radiator Springs, he wanted nothing to do with the racing world, and he left it completely behind. And he was able to live that way for a long time, until Lightning McQueen showed up. And even though he was resentful towards McQueen, he still ended up inspiring and teaching him. But his selfishness gets the better of him when, even though Lightning had changed and the other town's cars cared about him, he still forced him to leave, claiming that was what was best for everyone, even though he knew that wasn't true. The best way for Doc to move beyond the trauma of his past isn't to shut out the racing world entirely because of the problems it can cause and the selfishness that it can create. The best way for him to move forward is to go back into that world and find a way to change it for the better. And that opportunity was laid right at his feet. I've talked for a long time about the characters, which are excellently developed in this movie, but I haven't really talked much about the plot, because the amount of plot that there is in this movie is very minimal. The plot of this movie is very reminiscent of something you'd find in any low-budget rom-com that my mom watches at Christmas time. So what is it that makes this film so effective? I think the answer is character. The plot of this film being so simple makes it so much easier for Pixar to showcase how good they are at creating and developing believable characters. Lightning McQueen's development from selfish, cocky race car to a selfless and caring and understanding car at the end of the story is 100% believable because we were there with him every step of the way. Every scene was given all the time that it needed in order to effectively communicate to us how Lightning was growing and changing throughout the story. To where we get to the end of the film, and on the final lap of the climactic tiebreaker race with McQueen in the lead, but he stops, inches away from the finish line, noticing that the king, Strip Weathers, has crashed in the infield. The king had been nothing but honest and upstanding, and he had been the first car to try to help Lightning grow and change. He doesn't deserve to finish his last race in the dirt. So Lightning backs up, gives his win to Chick Hicks, and he pushes the king across the finish line. Where nearly every other version of this movie would have the main character learn there's more to racing than just winning, and then win at the end anyway so the story can have a feel-good ending, this movie is not afraid to have their character completely exemplify that message, and it makes it so much more effective. This film is all about how true joy is found in the details, and how the most valuable parts of life are often found in the simplest of things. So it's only fitting that Pixar was able to convey that message in such a simple, unassuming story. I love this movie, if you couldn't tell. I watched it countless times as a kid, and there's something that's just so comforting and nostalgic about watching it. But as with most Pixar movies, I appreciate it even more now. This is another film I think about a lot, and it's helpful for me to think about it when I have to realize I've been acting like a selfish jerk. We can all act like that sometimes, but if we can slow down, recognize it, and then look around us at the people in our lives, we can choose to live for them instead of ourselves. This is something I always want to be striving for, and I have this movie to thank for giving me a reminder when I need it. But that's going to be it for my analysis of Pixar's Cars. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye.